Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Camille looked anxiously at her granddaughter. The elderly woman's excitement was so strong that she involuntarily moved the hand that was tightened by the cuffs. But the house doctor of all strictness is an elementary school teacher, Granny remarked. I asked you to lie still, and your hands are twitching. I'll have to go over it again. The patient made an expressive gesture, which eloquently spoke her displeasure. What to waste time if everything is clear? There was both despair and indignation in the older woman's voice, but Emily had long since gotten used to her grandmother's maneuvers. Paying no attention to the size of the old woman, she again pumped to the limit of the cuffs. Camille for the propriety of it and swayed, but she did not express in verbal form her feelings. She watched her granddaughter's actions, expecting a death sentence, but Emily did not justify these hopes. Grandma, can you be put on the astronaut team? 130/80. That's like a well-trained athlete. And that's at your 80s with a little tail. Camille didn't like her granddaughter's tone, not to mention the result of the study. Pretending to be gravely ill. She changed from horizontal to sitting. Your machine is lying. You can throw it away. Too bad mine broke at the wrong time. But it was always right. I can tell from my condition that my upper blood pressure is at least 200. Emily had an excellent grasp on the intricacies of her grandmother's personality and wasn't even offended by her assessment of the imported device's abilities. Okay, if you don't trust me, let me call an ambulance. Camille's face changed instantly. Her entire large body expressed outrage. With a kind of bloodthirsty triumph in her voice, she declared, "You're where the dog is buried. I knew it. I sensed you were your mother. So you want to put me in the hospital to be finally killed." Emily laughed. Grandma, hospitals treat people, and you're telling me these stories. And the fact that your mom and I are trying to talk some sense into you is a sign of caring. You have no idea how much we love you. The granddaughter hugged the woman tightly and kissed her deeply wrinkled cheeks. Camille was touched. More than anything else in the world, she treasured such moments. The weight of the years had left many wounds on the heart of the old lady, and not all of them had healed completely, so she wanted her family to pay more attention to her. Today, too, towards morning, she felt uncomfortable with the loneliness of people watching from every corner. At such moments, she became very frightened. That was why she had called Emily. But the girl did not even reproach her relative for such an early call. Remembering it now, Camille decided to apologize. "Emily, I'm sorry I got you up at 6 o'clock, but I thought the woman with the scythe was already at the bedside. I know it's time to get ready, but I just want to live a little longer. It's okay. It's okay. I have to be at work by 8 o'clock anyway. I don't like your moodiness. They say that as long as a man lives, he should think about life. Yes, I try to think, but when I look in the mirror, I get scared." Camille was obviously being flirtatious because she looked quite good for her age. Despite her old age, the woman looked after herself and liked new outfits. Her daughter and granddaughter tried to prevent her every wish, and Evelyn, Emily's mother, many times offered to move into her spacious apartment, but insistent, and the grandmother categorically rejected such a possibility. "I've never lived and I want to die in my own apartment. Stephen and I earned these square meters with our own labor." Camille liked to make her life an example to others. She used every opportunity to involve the interlocutor in her memories. While Emily was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, her grandmother did not miss the opportunity. If you knew granddaughter, what hard times were then. Hunger, devastation, unsettledness. People were happy because they valued life. Now they value money more. Emily with a tray floated into the small living room already. "Let's have breakfast. I'm really going to be late for work. You young people, all in a hurry. Where are you running to? You get married in a hurry, and then you get divorced. Emily, tell me, will I have great-grandchildren?" A conversation on the subject. It's not the first time Grandma started it, but the girl always shrugged it off. To give you great-grandchildren, I need to at least marry first. Camille set the cup aside. She gave her granddaughter a curious look. So why the case? It's not that we've lost all the men in Russia. Your grandfather, Stephen, came back from the war without one leg, and there was no shortage of brides. But your grandfather chose you, not without pride. The old woman said who else could he choose but a labor striker? I have so many diplomas, and even have awards from the government. In those days, girls like that were valued. And your grandfather, despite his disability, was still a crucible and looked at other women. So I had to be on my guard all the time. Emily knew Grandma's love story well, but every time new details came out. Camille had never said before that Stephen had a weakness for the female sex. You never told me about Grandpa's adventures, Grandma. There was a heavy sigh. You don't talk bad about the dead. He drank my blood, your grandfather. But I still loved him and forgave him. It's easy now. Anything wrong, and we're on opposite sides. We put up with it because we were ashamed. We also felt sorry for the kids. Stephen set up 3 of them at once. The women at the construction site laughed at me, saying, Camille, do you go to the maternity hospital like a job? Every year at almost the same time. That was our life, and we loved for real. Emily looked at the old walkers, which inexorably counted the minutes. Of course, Grandma, it's always nice to talk to you, but I don't want to be late for work. Don't worry about me. I want to tell you in confidence that maybe soon your wish will come true. Camille stood up cheerfully, forgetting her hypertension. Is it Emily? Tell me, who is he? Do you know what I mean? What's not to understand? Just make sure you don't tell anyone yet. The old lady winked conspiratorially. I won't. But I don't know what we'll get with John yet. He's a simple and very kind guy. He and I have been dating for almost a year now. And my mother and father know about it. Bah, I told you, you're the first person I shared my secret with. The girl quickly cleared the table and was about to leave. But having remembered something important, Grandma stopped. Why do you want to wait for your great-grandchildren? Camille sighed again very expressively. I don't know if it's true or not, but they say that a woman who is lucky enough to have great-grandchildren is forgiven all her sins. Emily laughed. I had no idea you were superstitious. That's news to me. And believing in omens doesn't add up. Life is such a thing that sometimes incompatible things happen. Whoever thought the world would turn this way before? Emily walked to the bus stop, and the last of her grandmother's remarks never left her mind. About the world being upside down. Mentally, she recognized the old lady's rightness, because really, just in the last few years, things had changed a lot. Therefore, many people were still trying to preserve all the good and good that united them before. Barely the girl crossed the threshold of the office, in which 12 employees managed to coexist peacefully, as Jenna immediately at her for, Why are you late? I was just getting there. Good thing I didn't notice you were gone. Why are you like that? The friend tried to gesture. What's so surprising about Emily? She, in turn, asked what so. You can elaborate, but only brides shine like that. And Christmas trees. What kind of day is today? First, my grandmother asks me early in the morning when I'm getting married. And now you. Okay, fine. I'll give you the latest information. I'm not planning a wedding just yet. I might be a Christmas tree, though. You're kidding. I'm not gonna let you go. I know you and John are serious, so I'm hoping to be your maid of honor at your wedding, even if it's just for someone else's happiness. A little bit warmed the desks, and girlfriends stood flush to each other, which allowed them to secretly, without attracting the attention of all that accounting. Emily moved even closer to Jenna. I don't get it. I thought you and Christopher were fine. To be honest, I was kind of jealous. Well, girlfriend, love is over. Tomatoes are wilted. What was the reason? Did he lie to you or betray you? No, it would take a lot of effort to lie to me. It's just that times are tough with my girlfriend, and Christopher's been scraping by on odd jobs. And I'm a young and beautiful girl, and I want a party. And preferably every day. That confession shocked Emily. What about love? Jenna looked at her friend as if she was seeing her for the first time. I didn't realize you were so naive. Love is being able to satisfy your little whims at someone else's expense. That's why I resigned, Christopher. Your John is different. You know, he's got a sense of class. Even though he's still a young man. It's weird. I thought you understood all that. That's why you're together. Emily didn't like her friend judging her boyfriend like he was a horse instead of a human being. Jenna, let's switch to work, or you and I will get cut for talking. The girl squirmed, laying down funny, but took her friend's advice. After this conversation, Emily had an unpleasant residue on her soul, but Jenna was not at all embarrassed by her friend's changed mood and her unwillingness to return to this topic. At the end of the day, she asked to be a counselor. It's so boring alone. Let's go for a walk together. Emily was uncomfortable saying no to her best friend, and she agreed to such a plan, though not very willingly. Emily had very different plans for the evening, and knowing Jenna, she knew it would be for a long time. Okay, Chuckles, I'll try to comfort you a little, but John will be waiting for me. He and I were gonna go to the movies. Jenna clapped happily. Mittens and Snowflake, yay. I haven't been to a movie in 100 years. Emily, I didn't have time to add that the two of them wanted to go together. When John saw Emily show up with her date, he didn't seem surprised, did he? He had met Jenna a few times before, but his first impression of her was negative, so he greeted her rather dryly and looked at Emily expressively. I hadn't counted on another person participating in our cultural event. Otherwise, I would have bought 3 tickets at once. Jenna was not in the least embarrassed by such a clear hint that she was the one. The third extra. The girl laughed very loudly. You can buy a term. True, it would cost 3 times as much, but the matter will be solved. She looked around and then pointed her finger at the guy standing nearby. He was standing there, staring at nothing. He had a hood over his head, his eyes and face blank. John, that man over there definitely has tickets. Young man, surprised Jenna. Are you even informed in such matters? Yes, you are dangerous to be friends with. Jenna smiled contentedly. That's how you need to one too and have an effect. On the contrary, it is very useful to be friends with me. I know this guy because I've bought clothes from him many times. He used to paint rags for a cut. John, please hurry. Emily and I are gonna turn into icicles. It's Arctic cold. Emily hadn't said a word the whole time. She didn't expect her friend to behave so swaggeringly in the presence of her beau. She hadn't noticed Jenna's habits before, such as laughing loudly or pointing her finger at people in public. She even regretted that she hadn't culturally stitched up her friend, for whom she now had to blush in front of John. Somewhere inside, a beacon went off, warning of danger. Watch out, or your best friend will steal your boyfriend. But from the look of John and his mood, it was easy to guess that Jenna annoyed him a lot. During the session, her friend didn't hold back either. She commented aloud on the actions of the characters, and constantly she was cut in her seat. Therefore, Emily thickly and did not watch the picture with the participation of a famous Italian actor. Jenna, on the other hand, had quite a bit. I was so looking forward to seeing this movie. Thank you, John. She looked at him with such eyes. It made Emily uncomfortable. It seemed to her that Jenna had forgotten that John was dating her best friend. One more minute, and she'd just lash out at the guy. You're welcome. Unexpectedly, for a couple of lovers, Jenna fell out friends. I do not understand why you have such faces, as if you just had a spoon, fish, grease. Remember when they used to give us that stuff in kindergarten? Jenna laughed very loudly again. Emily just nodded her head in response to her friend's inappropriate question and wanted to say goodbye as they stood in front of Jenna's house. But she wasn't going to leave them so easily. Guys, I understand, but I'm warning you that I will be your maid of honor at your wedding, and no other candidates will be considered. Are you satisfied that you've made your point tonight? Jenna laughed very loudly again. John wrinkled his nose, but he said calmly, I must disappoint you, Jenna, but Emily and I are not getting married." Instantly, the joy on the face of the girl was replaced by surprise I did not understand. "It turns out that you, John, also give up eating and not even shy to admit it so publicly." The young man very cleverly put the insolent girl in her place, and Emily watched with satisfaction as she tried to realize the meaning of his words, so that the girl would not suffer in vain. He explained Jenna's decision to abandon the noisy celebration does not mean that someone has abandoned someone, especially so you cannot talk about a person, but to say, "And we will be fine and without a loud wedding. We'll just go to the registry office and run away secretly from everyone, and we'll spend the money on something useful." Jenna was hit with another wave of surprise. It's like an American movie. They go on a trip right after marry too. "John, you're good." For about 15 minutes, John and Emily had to listen to Jenna's coddling for the sake of decency. The frost was starting to creep through their warm clothes. Toward the end, all three of them were jumping in place to keep warm. Finally, Jenna gave in. Tonight was going to be a good night. Maybe we could go to the restaurant with the same group. When I opened the door at the entrance, the young man breathed a sigh of relief. Emily tried to justify herself for her friend's behavior. "I'm sorry you had to put up with Jenna's jibber-jabber. She's a normal girl. It's just that today, she had a meltdown. I didn't expect it to get so ugly. I've never had to deal with anything so special. What I don't understand is what you two have in common. You're so different. Well, there's no mystery. It's just that we went to kindergarten together, and then we sat at the same desk. She's always so reckless. I mean, her dad's a big shot, so Jenna's been used to getting what she wants since she was a diaper. I wish her daddy would teach his daughter some manners. I couldn't help myself when she started asking about our wedding. I really wanted to sass that girl. In fact, she ruined the whole thing for me." "What do you mean?" John stopped and looked into the girl's eyes. "As strange as this may sound, but today was the day I was going to propose to you. But your best friend messed up my plans, so I'll have to limit myself to the standard question in such cases. Sure, yeah, half of the procedure is done. And now part 2. Please, maestro, fanfare." John Fool himself played the orchestra, and then solemnly took a velvet box out of his pocket. A ring, as is proper on such occasions. The girl opened the box in the color of a street lamp, and a bright gem winked cheerfully at her. Oh, it was a real diamond. It was the happiest day of Emily's life. The girl could not sleep for a long time, recounting in her memory every minute of the wonderful evening. On that frosty February night, spring was ringing in her heart, and she believed that the best was yet to come. The first year in married life flew by unnoticed. Emily could not escape the feeling that it was all happening in a dream. The women at work made fun of her. Our Emily was giving off a vibe. You can get a free load of happiness. It's rare to find such a thing in life, that a honeymoon stretches for a whole year. The girl smiled embarrassedly and tried to guffaw. "You just pay too much attention to my person. I've never walked around with a sour face before. I always tried to find positive things, even in a private day." Jenna was the only one who didn't keep everyone's spirits up. She had once again failed in her personal life and was now openly jealous of her friend's marital happiness. Once, during a lunch break, which they traditionally spent in a nearby cafe, Jenna even made a remark. "In vain you flaunt your prosperous life." The girl was surprised. On the contrary, it always seemed to me that happy people radiate kindness. Personally, I'm ready to share with anyone. How can I understand you, John? Will you rent your own? Jenna, I didn't expect you to say that. If you weren't my friend, I'd definitely be offended. Sometimes I get the impression that you're not happy for me or that I owe you something. Emily almost cried with resentment. So Jenna tried to remedy the situation. "Why are you so sour? You know I'm not being mean." "Well, my tongue is so bad. It's like I'm talking nonsense. No offense, Emily. It's not like I resent you, John, for not getting married." The tension was released, and both girls smiled at the end of the meal when they put down their dessert plates. Jenna asked Emily with a piercing sadness. What is happiness? I guess it's different for each person. You know, I recently came across a collection of poems by a poetess. Anyway, she survived the war. There was love and betrayal in her life. One of her poems struck me. It's about happiness, which this woman had spent her whole life collecting in bits and pieces. But you can't get a lot of happiness that way. It's very beautifully put, though. Yes, beautiful and right. You know, Jenna, my grandmother told me many times about her youth. Grandpa was legless, and she cut her throat for him. I'm sorry, I didn't put it well. But according to the stories of my favorite grandmother, a person was valued before, and it doesn't matter what physical defects he had. It was what was inside that mattered. Jenna looked at Emily with wide-open eyes. Oh, come on, girlfriend. You should not sit in the accounting department and lecture at some liberal arts university. I'm gonna quit accounting soon. What's another surprise? John, you got another job. You could say that. We're about to have a new addition. This news took Jenna by surprise. She hadn't had time to prepare for it internally. And on her handsome pilot flashed a displeased grimace, but quickly pulling herself together, the girl naively became. Emily, I'm so happy for you. I mean for you too. Of course, so much happiness, and in the same hands from it can be crazy. But if I missed your wedding, where I wanted to be a bridesmaid, then at least take me as a godmother. Emily made no promises. At those who returned from a direct answer duty phrases should still give birth, and then think about everything else. By the way, my grandmother used to say that you can't even buy clothes for a baby that hasn't been born. It's a very bad omen. And it seems to me that it's all nonsense. Dumb beliefs, as they say. What to be? That will not pass. Personally, when I get ready for motherhood, I'll prepare everything in advance for the baby. How I envy you now. I want it all too. To calm her friend, Emily advised her to have everything you will definitely have, Jenna. You just have to change your outlook on life a little. A crane in the sky looks more attractive because it is high at a distance and imperfections are not noticeable. I get the hint. But your version of a tit is definitely not going to work for me. It's easy for you to argue because your John has achieved something that others haven't. He's got a good job and a good salary. You're behind him like a wall. And the tit. That's utopia. Whoever can't get to the sky needs help. I'm not ready to be a wall for anyone. Emily was not in the habit of imposing her opinion on others. She decided that there was no point in arguing with her friend about the values of life. After this conversation, their paths began to diverge in different directions. Emily began to avoid eating together in the cafeteria, and Jenna did not insist. Soon the friend was promoted. Jenna decided to celebrate her professional triumph with a bang. Girls on such an occasion, and I do not hide the glade. The meeting place is a campground, Pines outside the city. Please don't be late. After giving out instructions, Jenna approached the table where Emily was sitting. I hope you're not from the college. The staff. But Emily pointed to her belly. Where am I going with a watermelon like that? If it were still here, then I would definitely spend time in warm company. I'm not going out of town. I don't want to take any chances. Well, what do you know? A month before her maternity leave, Emily felt ill. Her legs were severely cut off. Unsightly spots appeared on her face. After conferring with her husband, she decided to take a leave of absence. With application in hand, she entered the supervisor's office without knocking. Jenna, I have to go. Jenna gives her an unfriendly look. First of all, it's not Jenna, it's Jenna. And secondly, cultured people knock before they enter an executive's office. What's going on in there? Although the freshly minted supervisor could see Emily was having trouble standing, she didn't even offer her a chair. On the contrary, she spent several minutes studying the short text of only 2 lines. I'm sorry, but I have to turn you down. The annual report is coming up. You know that. But I have to go on maternity leave in less than a month anyway. So you'll go on vacation like you're supposed to in a month. Emily was on her way out the door when she heard the sarcastic. So how's your happiness going? A lot of it was collecting grains. Don't you want to share? Emily was struck rather not by the words, but by the intonation with which her friend spat out her gloating. But the new boss decided to continue. Now look at you and me and tell me which one of us is happier. You're painful to look at. Sprawled out like a frog. I'm the favorite. Good position, salary, respect. I'm getting used to it, and I'll find a husband. Emily almost physically felt as if the last thread connecting her to her friend had broken. Probably, this breakup had a negative impact on her health, because in the evening of the same day, she went to the hospital for preservation. John was very worried about the condition of his spouse and the future child, but the doctor assured everything will be fine. There is no special reason to worry. It's just that your wife was a little nervous. But it'll pass for a while. She'll rest with us and go home in a couple weeks. The doctor wasn't lying. Indeed, Emily was soon discharged, and the doctor made one last joke about parting for a while. Gain strength and come back for the baby. During the time left before the birth, Emily prepared herself for future motherhood. She reread a lot of useful literature, but she liked the book by the famous American pediatrician Benjamin Term. When John caught his wife reading this treatise, he was surprised. I see you're all set, and I'm allowed to study the references. After all, I want to be very involved too. I'm all for it. Here you go. John took the book, but it was obvious that his mind was on something else. Emily decided to help him out. Honey, is there something you wanted to ask me? Is there? Listen, I was at a meeting at City Hall the other day and I was almost speechless when I saw your friend there. I think it was Jenna. Yeah, that's the one. But I don't talk to her anymore. Why is that, if it's no secret? No secret. It's just that even a little bit of power changes a person so much. I see. I'll keep that in mind. Anatoly, I almost invited her to our house. Why didn't you tell me? Why? John, you yourself probably at least once in your life faced a situation when you realized that with some person you are not on the way. That's what happened with Jenna and me. Our friendship turned out to be a bubble, but I don't regret breaking up with her. It's just the bitterness that lingers. It'll pass, especially since you won't have to go back to your accounting department. Have you made up your mind for me? Know that I'd like to suggest a change of career. We're opening some branches soon, and we're gonna need to expand our staff. Okay, honey, I'll think about it. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Although the whole family was worried about Emily, a real friend and like-minded John found in the person of Camille. Emily's grandmother calmed the future father down. Everything will be fine. All women give birth. That's our lot in life. And Emily will cope with this task. The man wanted to believe the words of a wise woman, but anxiety for his wife and child kept him on his toes. Thank you, Camille, for your support. Your words to God's ears. Don't worry, sweetheart. Heaven hears everything and angels are already circling ready to protect your baby. Emily's father stayed on the phone. Finally, he joyfully shouted, all gave birth to a girl, we have a granddaughter. In spite of the late hour, the relatives hurried to the hospital. Even Camille decided to keep up with the company. Emily's mother wanted to cool the old lady's ardor. Mom, where are you going to go skiing and stay home? No, not that. I've waited so long for this day to stay home. When the delegation of relatives appeared in the emergency room, the nurse on duty looked at the unusual team with surprise. Wait, I'll call the ward now. Not 2 minutes passed as the girl reappeared. Who is the father of the newborn? John took a step forward. Aya. Wait, the doctor will be here in a bit. He wants to talk to you. The girl tried not to look into the eyes of the happily smiling John. The doctor who had invited him into the office also had a strange expression on his face, but the first words of the doctor shocked the man. It's very hard for me to say this, but the girl was not born quite healthy. She has a severe heart defect, and she needs special care now. We have everything ready at home. The conditions are perfect. You misunderstand me. The baby can't breathe on her own, so we're gonna put her in a ditch. It's a special chamber where she'll be given oxygen. When she's a little stronger in about 2 weeks, the perinatal center, and she'll be operated on. John wasn't quite sure what the doctor was talking about. What surgery? What are you talking about? She's just a little baby. I'll be honest with you, the baby won't survive without surgery. Your wife doesn't know anything yet. It was a difficult labor, and we haven't told her anything yet. So it's up to you to decide. If it's a matter of saving a life, of course I agree. But how could this happen? Why? That's a question no one can answer. The most important thing now is to determine a treatment strategy. Don't despair. Although the threshold is difficult, not everything is lost, but you will have to do several operations. So have courage and patience. Basically, now the future of the baby depends on you and your wife. John left the doctor's office and sank down on the couch without strength. Emily's parents and grandmother looked fearfully at the grief-stricken father. John, my dove, tell me, what's wrong? Camille clutched at the man's arm. Emily's parents also stood with aggrieved faces. What's wrong with Emily? John, don't say anything. No, with the baby. The girl was born with a malformation. With his head down, the man wandered toward the exit. Camille tried to catch up with him. You can't write it like that. They cure such diseases today, and my granddaughter will be cured. John stopped and looked at the old woman with his manly smile. I envy your optimism, Camille, but I don't believe in angels and heavenly powers anymore. You shouldn't have faith. Faith gives you strength. First, John tried to follow the advice of my wife's grandmother. He helped his wife in everything, on whose shoulders all the hardest things fell. After the first operation that little Wendy had when she was only a month and a half old, the girl recovered quickly. As it should be, a healthy baby, in a year she already independently ran and happily made a mess in the apartment. But it is known that trouble comes from there, where no one expects it to come from. Young parents rejoiced at every success of their daughter and tried to diversify her leisure time. They did not refuse the invitation of a colleague at work whose daughter was a few months older than Wendy. John, come as a family. Our girl is 2 years old. We want to celebrate in a fun way. The party was a success. Happy Emily and John watched their daughter play enthusiastically with other children. The consequences of the event manifested themselves after 2 days. The girl began to suffocate, and the mark on the thermometer all the time showed 39. For 2 weeks, the child was saved in intensive care, but a trivial cold left the most severe consequences. Wendy never fully recovered, and every half hour she had to be given oxygen. For the Yum family, the days were dark. Most of the budget was spent on necessary medications and trips to the best clinics, although relatives helped as much as they could, but the funds were clearly insufficient. And then there is a distinguished professor to whom they almost got to a consultation, said, "The situation is grave. The little girl's heart is like an old woman's. It cannot withstand even minimal loads." Emily pleaded, "What should we do? Help save the girl." The professor philosophically remarked, "Sometimes medicine is powerless. You have a special case, but tears and pleading will not help you here. The only correct solution, in my opinion, will be a repeated operation to install an artificial valve. But it's still a temporary measure. In the long run, we need the help of transplant surgeons." John's alert. "Professor, you mean to say that yes, you have understood me correctly. Your daughter will need a donor heart. But I want to warn you right away that the waiting list is years long. They say shared grief brings people together. But Emily and John worked out against that law. 6 months after the consultation of the famous professor, Wendy had a second operation, but it had almost no positive result. The girl was practically unable to exist without the machine through which she breathed. Therefore, Emily could not take her out even for a walk. For the mother and the sick girl, the world was now confined to the size of a 2-room apartment with a balcony. And down there, a very different life was simmering. But despite her serious illness, Wendy was unrecognizable. She was homeschooled and eagerly awaited the arrival of her teachers. Another of the girl's hobbies was drawing. In her incomplete 8 years, she accurately conveyed all the shades and details of the plot of her work. She was happy to show it to anyone who wanted to see it. One day the teacher, who came to visit them every day, said, "Your girl has a talent. If you don't mind, I will show her drawings to an artist I know who teaches at the Academy of Art." At first, Emily did not pay any attention to the words of the young teacher, but she gave her daughter several works, and soon forgot about it. The load of worldly cares, every day more and more heavily pressed on the woman. One day she confessed to her mother, who visited them daily. The girl nodded at the mask. "Don't think that if a person has a bad heart, his head doesn't work. I understand everything perfectly well." "And what do you understand about what?" "Mom and Dad don't seem to be fighting, but they're no longer happy like they used to be. And I wish they were cheerful again. And we'd all go to the park together for a walk. Do you remember that?" "I do. That's why I paint my pictures, to make a lot of money. I'm going to sell them." Evelyn was struck by the pragmatism of a sick girl. "Who put you up to this?" "Grandma, you're crazy. I saw on TV how a boy with no arms could hold a brush with his lips and paint. I have arms and legs, but they'll sew my heart back on later." So the professor said, "Oh, you're distracting me. I wanted to show you the picture I'm going to give to Mom and Dad." The girl rummaged through the folder with drawings, and after a second pulled out a colorful drawing. Wendy and her parents could be easily recognized in the 3 smiling people. The girl corrected the mask and asked with undisguised pleasure, "Really? Great. Just great. Are you such a good girl?" Tears came to her eyes. And not to upset her granddaughter, Evelyn left the balcony. "I'm gonna go help your mom, and you draw." The drawing with a positive subject remained on the balcony. Apparently, the young artist forgot to hide it in her folder. In the evening, John, as usual, showed up when his wife and daughter were already asleep. He decided to go out on the balcony to get some fresh air, and so noticed his daughter's drawing. "What is it?" "It's Wendy. She wanted to give us a present for our wedding anniversary, but while talking to her grandmother, she forgot to put her drawing away." John didn't notice his wife coming over, despite her heart condition. Our Wendy is drawing and generally trying to live the life of a normal child, and she is succeeding. It's a shame you don't see it. Emily disappeared into the bedroom. John, for a long time in the moonlight, looked at the drawing, in which everything was filled with special meaning. Emily did not wait for any words from her husband. She thought that something would awaken in him that would make him return to the John she knew. But he went to bed silently, also silently left for work in the morning. Emily knew from his phone conversations that her husband was up for a promotion and justified his constant delays with that. The fact that he was promoted Emily, of course, pleased. After all, it is an addition to the salary, and maybe they will be able to buy Wendy something more expensive, which will help her better than domestic drugs. But the next day, something happened that made Emily forget her worries. Toward lunchtime, the doorbell rang. Yes, so insistently that even Wendy lifted her head from her drawing. Emily wiped her hands and went to open it. Strange. Who could it be? On the doorstep stood the same teacher who had admired Wendy's drawings and had even taken some to show someone. With her was a man in his 60s, 65. "Hello, Emily. Forgive me for dropping by unannounced. I'd like you to meet him. This is the artist, the teacher from the Academy of Art, Robert." Emily thought she'd heard that name before on TV when the man was being honored with an award. "Hello. Come in, please." The man immediately sat down next to Wendy. They talked about something and his eyebrows went up every now and then. Then he asked Wendy, "Do you have any of your favorite drawings?" The girl smiled. "Of course, I even have them in a separate folder." The girl looked at Emily, and she quickly pulled out the folder with the drawings. "Maybe some tea?" Robert smiled. "You know, I wouldn't say no to that." Half an hour later, they sat down at the set table. Wendy sat on the kitchen sofa eagerly, catching every word the artist said. "You see, Emily, will you allow me to call you that?" Yes, of course, your girl has talent, but I think you realize that yourself. I feel like a snail in a shell. I imagine my sweet grandmother would be telling me off right now for saying that. I wish she were here. I miss her a lot too. Mom was a great optimist. I only saw her cry once. It was when my father died. So always with a smile and a push. We don't so much want to be like Grandma, but we can't. Especially lately. I'm always moping around, just hanging in there for Wendy. Oh, John, I mean, he used to support you through everything. Or has that changed? Emily didn't want to dump her problems on her mother's head, but she felt a desperate need to share them with someone. I don't know, maybe it's just a figment of my sick imagination. But John has changed a lot, especially in the last year. He's become irritable, even rude to me. He won't even go into Wendy's room. You should talk to him. I've tried, but he's avoiding direct conversation. I get the impression he's afraid of me and Wendy and everything in this house. You know what, Mom? My husband's been coming home closer to midnight, so I'm starting to think he's got another woman. If he leaves me and my daughter, I don't know how we're gonna live. Don't you dare even think about that. Thank God you're not alone. Your father and I are always there for you, and John is a very responsible man. I'm sure he wouldn't do something as mean as this. Oh, Mom, I'm not so sure about that. He's changed. Suddenly, Emily thought of the teacher who had praised Wendy's talent. I've bored you to tears, but there's good news. Vanessa, the teacher, took some drawings to show the artist. Of course, I don't believe in all the Cinderella stories, but who knows? Evelyn said thoughtfully, I told you 100 times my granddaughter gems. It takes such a sick child to draw like that. Would you hire a tutor or art teacher for her? Mom, I'd love to, but with what money? We're barely making ends meet as it is. Medicines are so expensive, and we have the only breadwinner, and he's always in a bad mood. And you don't need anything. I don't think lessons like this will cost much. My father and I will help. Maybe our Wendy will become a famous artist. Where is she, by the way? Emily nodded in the direction of the balcony, where she was organizing a plain air painting in the nature. Although you can hardly call nature a small oasis of green under our balcony. The girl was passionately drawing with her tongue sticking out. The mask of the device did not interfere with the creative process, and the young artist deftly corrected it every time she changed her body position. Evelyn leaned over to examine her granddaughter's work. Well done, my good girl. Grandma, I didn't realize you were here. The mask slipped traitorously from her face, and the girl began to gulp for air with her mouth. Evelyn quickly fixed the device. You mustn't make any sudden movements, and you mustn't even get excited. Grandmother, you don't have to be afraid for me. I'm used to it. A lady came to visit us and said that she would soon give me a device so that I could go out with it. Emily confirmed it from afar. It slipped my mind. Wendy was sponsored by a foundation called Sunshine. They've actually promised to help with the purchase of a new machine. But it's gonna take a while to raise enough money. But thank you for visiting, bringing gifts. Wendy was unhappily interrupted by her mother. Mom, you've been talking to Grandma for almost an hour. Now it's my turn. Emily conceded to her daughter. All right, folks, I'll shut up and won't bother you. I'd better go to the kitchen and make something tastier. Taking advantage of his mother's absence, Wendy called his grandmother. And I have something to show you. Mom and Dad's anniversary is coming up. Evelyn asked in surprise. How do you know, Grandma? Do you think I'm so little? I even walk around the apartment alone sometimes without that nasty thing. Talent is a rare thing these days. That's why you have to work hard to find it. I have a son. He is a businessman, and he helps children and me at the same time. From time to time, he organizes children's exhibitions. I think you've heard of them. Well, I think that your daughter's work is worthy of such an exhibition, worthy of recognition. Emily listened and could not believe her ears. She thought her daughter was just good at drawing. It's not that much of a talent. And it turns out, I don't even know. You can see that. Wendy, She's not exactly healthy. That's no reason for her to be recognized. Besides, it's to your advantage. The more people know about Wendy, the more likely someone will be able to help her. And I'd like to provide Wendy with a personal art teacher. You will determine the times when you are comfortable having a stranger in the house. The young artist's first solo exhibition was at the Children's Art House. On Family Day, it's a joyous occasion. Wendy met on the rise because a few days before she was given a new machine. Therefore, the master of drawing could attend the presentation herself. Emily tried not to let her daughter notice how bad she felt. Emily. As soon as it was known that the exhibition was definitely going to happen, they were announced the date and time. Emily tried to tell her husband about it. True, it did not work on the first day. He came already at 0 o'clock. So Emily got up early to prepare breakfast for John early. And at breakfast to tell him everything. He entered the kitchen, looked at the pancakes and scrambled eggs. Then he looked at Emily and sighed faintly and sat down at the table. John, do you want coffee or tea? Coffee. She placed the mug in front of him. John, I need to talk to you. Emily, I've got a lot on my mind right now. And I want to eat breakfast so I can concentrate. She could see that her husband was having trouble holding back, but she wasn't about to back down. It's nice when you're never here. I need to talk. I need to work things out. After all, you can. Emily stepped back to the window and turned away from him. John looked at her carefully for the first time in a long time. The jeans she'd had on since before she was pregnant. They were so weathered that they seemed purposely frayed. Some kind of uniform t-shirt. Emily appeared very thin in it, though she did seem to have lost a lot of weight. Hair in bunches. He'd always hated the bun. But she used to laugh and say, "Do you think I should sweep up dust with my hair?" Yes, Emily has changed a lot. If that's the case, you can see it on a young woman. What to say about him and his pants? It's a year old too. Of course, he has others, but it's still a long time since he buys what he wants. Yes, he doesn't buy anything at all, doesn't make anything of what he wants. All he does is work and bring in money. Sometimes he has the feeling that he comes home after a paycheck, throws all the money into a big cauldron that burns with hellfire, and immediately realizes it is possible to turn around and go back to work, because there is no more money. Lately, John has been realizing that he's tired of it all. He doesn't want to live like this anymore. Yes, Emily loves him, and Wendy is not to blame. But he's human too. He hasn't done anything wrong in front of God. He shouldn't have to carry all this. He's not even 40 yet, and he feels like he's well into his 60s. So the life he hasn't lived is over. There's nothing ahead of him. I mean, it's the same as it is now. Emily turns around, and John sees the determination in her eyes. Emily, don't start. We'll talk. We'll talk about everything. Give me a few days to get my thoughts together. She suddenly agreed. All right. Aha. Let's do it Friday. We can't drag this out any longer. We have a show on Sunday. She wanted to say exhibition, but John had already left. Emily grinned sadly. For more than a year now, he didn't kiss her when he came. Didn't kiss her when he left. At first she cried resentful, but then she accepted nothing. She and her mom bought a beautiful Wendy dress for Friday. After all, it's the first important event in her life. John didn't come home on Friday. He didn't show up until Saturday. But it was already night, and waking him up in the morning to go to the exhibition didn't work. Emily could clearly smell the booze. It was so strange. John didn't like to drink at all. Anyway, they were already running late, so they left him to it. They left for the trade show. Evelyn, really mumbling. What kind of father is that? Such an event not to go to the child. Mom, I can't even tell him about this event because John is never home. Evelyn choked with indignation. But that's okay. She will talk to John again. Emily has fallen out of love. It happens. But the baby had nothing to do with it. The show was a real success. So many words were said for Wendy that the girl got excited and even had to take medication. But the grandmother and mother saw it coming, so it was without consequences. And then, at the very end of the party, Robert brought a man to them. "Lovely ladies, please love and applaud. This is my son, Kevin. He's the man who organized this party." Emily smiled involuntarily. Robert spoke of his son with ill-concealed pride. "Good evening. I am very glad that my father was not mistaken again. Creative people light up very quickly. But tonight I'm shocked even though my dad says I can't feel like artists." Emily had time to look at the man while they were having a quite secular dialogue, about 40 years old, maybe a little more. Very personable, austere, but not until he started smiling. His smile was mischievous, boyish, and at that moment it was clear that no, he was 40 and could not be. "I actually approached you for 2 reasons, or rather, 2 things. The first, Emily, several people would like to buy your daughter's drawings since she is a minor. Our man will help you decide on the price. He handles auction sales. And secondly, I would like to invite you all to a restaurant to celebrate such a success, but apparently it will not be possible." He looked pityingly at Wendy, who was terribly tired, pale, and thoughtful. "Yes, unfortunately. No way. Wendy should have rested a long time ago." But then Evelyn intervened. "Emily, I think that such an event should be celebrated on this day. You could invite Kevin and Jenna to visit." She turned to the men. "You just can't imagine how she cooks. I always told her she should go to work in a restaurant instead of a boring accounting department." Emily smiled modestly. She was uncomfortable with her mom's words. But now some words from her were required. "Okay, let's do Tuesday. It's a free day, Wendy, no classes." Robert smiled contentedly. "Oh, I'm so pleased. If only who knew. I hate these restaurants. I've had them all my life, and I'm always mixing up forks." That's his confession. Emily was immediately relieved. A second before his words, she was feverishly thinking about how to set and prepare everything so as not to fall into the mud. It turned out that great people could be ordinary, too. They agreed on a time. Kevin offered them a ride. Evelyn immediately said she had somewhere else to be, so Emily and Wendy had to go alone. They talked mostly about the exhibition at home. Kevin smiled. "So I'll see you the day after tomorrow. Does that sound right?" "Good. By then, I think we'll have a buyer in mind." They said a warm farewell, and Wendy could barely move her legs. "I didn't call it." Emily immediately put her to bed. She heard John splashing in the bathtub. "Very good. Now they're going to talk. Well, he's not callous enough not to be happy about his daughter's success." About 20 minutes later, the bathroom door opened. John appeared in the kitchen outside the house. He didn't even ask where they were. It was like a kid with oxygen masks on his face, walking around free and clear all the time. "Yeah, we're home. It's really good that you're home too. Otherwise, lately we only know about my husband having Wendy's daddy from memory." He turned to her abruptly. "And I don't understand what's wrong. I pass you like an ox, and I can't even afford anything. All the money goes into the abyss. You must have forgotten that there is another life, the life that normal people live. They go to the movies, buy themselves expensive things. Their homes don't smell like medicine. They work to live a life of pleasure. My life is weird. I'm 30-something. I'm young. I want to live." Emily stood silent and looked at her husband in horror. It can't be. It wasn't him, because her John couldn't say that. I mean, she knew him well. He was always worried about them. He loves them. "John, I don't know what you're talking about. Wendy, our daughter, was born this way." He turned sharply toward her. "No, not us, you. You're the one who gave birth to a sick child. You're torturing yourself. You're torturing the baby. And you've decided that I don't want my life either. But I'm wrong. You're the only one in this whole situation. Wendy's sick, and I'm Pasha, seeing no light, seeing no money, day and night. And you're just being there for her. You work, you spend mine, but sometimes you give your daughter medicine. John, What are you talking about? Emily took a few steps and literally fell into a chair. That I'm telling the truth. And I don't understand why I have to suffer. Basically, it's not life. It's just existence. I'm sick of it. Do you understand? Do you or don't you? Emily said in a surprisingly calm voice. And what do you propose to change? What do you need to do to find a way out of this situation? You do realize that we can't change anything yet. That's right. But I can. Why should everyone suffer? If just one person can live a normal life. I even shook my head to try to understand what my husband was saying. John, I don't understand you. He's sitting next to me at the table. Emily, I'm leaving. I don't care what you think of me, but I don't want to live like this anymore. Emily felt the ground shake under her feet. You're leaving. But it's death to Wendy. You know the medication they're giving her barely works. We have to buy everything. What are we gonna do without you? Emily, don't try to make me feel sorry for you. I'm not. I'm trying to understand if you're knowingly going through with this, knowing exactly what leaving you means to your daughter. John stood up silently and walked out into the hallway. Emily followed him. Tears came in torrents. John, please think about it. Think what will happen to us. But he threw on his jacket, turned to her. When you calm down, pack my things and don't try to bother me. It won't make a difference anyway. He closed the door behind him, and Emily slid quietly down the wall. What to do now? How to live? About 10 minutes later, she heard her daughter calling her. Emily rushed to her. Wendy was pale, but it was nothing Emily did not notice. Mommy, can I draw? Emily smiled. You draw all the time. Don't you get tired? No, Mommy, why do I like you so much? I even feel better about myself. Emily restrained herself as much as she could so that her daughter would not guess anything. She didn't need that kind of excitement. That evening, when Wendy was already asleep, Emily sat down in the kitchen to assess what they had of their medications and what they would have to buy soon. Then I counted the money, but they'll last a couple months if nothing goes up in price. What then? She clearly realized that if she didn't think of anything in those 2 months, everything would come to an end. It wasn't until the next day that she remembered they had company. Having to tear a little more from the budget was all for Wendy. Emily did everything automatically. She smiled machine-like at her daughter. She cooked, talked to her, and her mind kept racing with the thought, what to do. The guests arrived on time. Her mom had called to say her father was sick, and not to risk Wendy, she wouldn't be coming. She didn't want to catch a cold. I'm sorry, daughter. I'll manage. And then I'll be on my own. All right, Mom. I'll manage. Robert and his son showed up 1 minute later. Emily smiled, invited him into the room. Robert immediately dropped out. What smells? No, you tell me. How can you trade those smells for restaurant smells? Kevin smiled. Dad had always been a stickler for home-cooked meals and family gatherings at home. Mom never could get him used to the social rounds. Why didn't you bring your mom along? Emily looked at Kevin. She died 10 years ago. Dad barely made it out. Loved her dearly. Mom was an opera singer and sang until she died. Romantic nature. She loved her very much. Glitter, glamour. He was quiet for a while. And Dad, I'm so sorry. Emily was so upset. Who'd pulled her tongue? It's okay. We feel better now. Jenna's voice came from the room. He was talking to Wendy. Emily made a gesture toward the room. Come in, please. When they entered, Robert was standing by Wendy's desk, looking at something and frowning at Lou Brow. He threw a quick glance at Emily. Then said, Kevin, come here. Now the two men were looking at the drawing, and both were silent. Emily smiled. What did you see there? You know. By the way, I wanted to look at it too, but Wendy stopped her. Mommy, it's not finished yet. Wendy quickly hid the drawing. Emily, of course, was very surprised, but did not argue. Later, she would ask her daughter since when was she not allowed to look at it. Drawings that are not quite finished yet. While sitting at the table and listening to Robert loudly admiring each dish, Emily seemed to relax a little. Kevin pushed his plate away. "Well, can we talk business now? Emily, here's a card that will receive funds from the sale of drawings of Wendy's paintings. There's already a few on there. I'd like your permission to take some to Italy. There's the annual Young Talent Show in a week. The prize is very impressive, but participation requires your written consent and a small photo shoot of Wendy." Emily shrugged. "Sure, why not?" Robert asked Emily, "Tell me, how do you live? Do you have a foundation or do you have your own foundation?" "I recently took the Sunny Foundation under my wing. They bought us a portable machine. We couldn't afford it on our own. Pardon me for the indiscreet question about medicine. We all realize that we don't have much money. My husband made a good living, but his salary was barely enough." "I'm sorry, why was he earning?" "He lost his job." Emily smiled sadly. Only now she realized that she was all alone with her problems. "No, he left us just yesterday. She said she couldn't work for me and a sick child for the rest of her life." Kevin choked on his tea. Robert clenched his fists. "Don't you worry, Emily. Everything in life is for the best." She smiled weakly. John walked to the park and sat down on a bench. Not half an hour later, a woman came and sat next to him. "So, did you talk?" "It was fine. What do you think?" Jenna placed her hand affectionately on his shoulder. "John, relax. All the bad stuff is behind you. There's nothing but positivity ahead. In a month you and I are going to the sea. It'll be a great reward for your suffering. You'll come back with renewed vigor. Let's get to work. The promotion is yours for sure. You realize you've been living without oxygen." "I do." "Jenna, let's make a bigger deal. Just don't bring them up." "Sure. What do you say? So, shall we go home? I ordered dinner from the restaurant. I also bought a nice wine. I'm taking the day off tomorrow, so we have all night." John smiled. He would try to put out of his mind everything that prevented him from having a good life. It was the kind of life he had dreamed of, or rather started to dream of when he started to get closer to Jenna. It had all happened suddenly. He hadn't even thought about it. Cheating on Emily, especially not with Jenna, whom he had disliked since the very first day he met her. To be honest, he hadn't seen her in a long time. Probably since Emily was pregnant. I hadn't seen her, and I'd never been interested. What difference does it make how his wife's ex-girlfriend lives? That day, his car failed to start once again. And of course, not at home, but at work. The time is such that public transportation does not run, and a cab is very expensive, almost to the other side of the city. He decided to walk a few stops closer to the center. There the minibuses were definitely very thirsty. John saw a store ahead of him and turned there to buy some water. At the door, he was almost knocked down by some lady. "I beg your pardon." And the lady suddenly said, "John, are you or is it?" He looked up in surprise. In front of him stood Jenna, groomed with makeup, perfumed with expensive perfume. Not Jenna recognized. "What are you doing here at this hour?" "Yeah, my car broke down. I'm walking to the center, and I'm driving. You can see my head standing there." He turned around and saw a pretty fresh BMW in bright blue. "It's a nice machine." Jenna laughed. "That's not what I mean. I mean, I can give you a ride. Go ahead, buy what you need and get out. I'll wait for the car." John went to the counter. It was kind of a mixed feeling. On the one hand, I didn't want to see Jenna. On the other hand, she's so beautiful, so fashionable, so free. It was like a breath of fresh air. He sat down in the car, which smelled of new leather, expensive perfume, something else so forgottenly expensive. Jenna smiled. "Did you like it?" She laughed. "You make it sound like you're starving yourself. You had a pretty good job, as I recall. But the job hasn't gone anywhere. Everything else is gone. I mean, Wendy's sick. All the money, absolutely everything, goes to her treatment. Emily doesn't work, so we can't use my paycheck for anything extra. If you knew how sick I am of this, he said, and was afraid of his own words. He had never let himself do that before. Jenna looked at him thoughtfully. Listen, let's take the stress out of retirement. I just finished my reports at work. I'm the boss, but I'm tired as a dog. John wasn't much of a drinker, but I just didn't want to go home so badly. So he said, let's go back to my place. I have everything in my bar that the soul desires. The man, to be honest, did not expect such a turn. I thought they'd sit somewhere neutral, and now it's her house. He wasn't a little boy and understood perfectly well how such meetings ended. He was suddenly overcome with a fever. He pictured Jenna on the regional sheets with a glass of champagne in her hands. In a hoarse voice he replied, "Give it to you." That evening, or rather night, turned everything upside down in John's head. Jenna very unobtrusively made him realize that his self-sacrifice was just dope. Well, I mean, come on. What's your fault? You don't have any genetic abnormalities. There's no one in your family with this disease. Why do you have to suffer your whole life? Don't you think it's a little unfair? Are you earning money? You could have a very good life. I'm sorry, it's none of my business. Let's have a drink. They had another drink, and then Jenna put on some beautiful music and asked him to dance. It had been so long since he'd danced. It had been so long since he'd been in such a romantic setting. He left Jenna, and in the morning he told himself it wouldn't happen again. He went home quietly. Immediately caught, though barely noticeable, but the smell of medicine, all so gray, dull, went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator. Everything is so ordinary. Even to take and just eat something tasty will not work, because such impractical food they just do not have. Everyone's on a very tight budget. Jenna called him a week later. He didn't know how she got his number, but he was glad. "John, hi. I don't know how you're gonna take my offer. Anyway, it's my birthday tomorrow. It's a non-circular date, so no celebration. I've been thinking and thinking about who I'd like to sit with. And you know, I've decided that you're the only person I want to see at my house." Was he pleased? He sure did. He'd long since forgotten that Jenna was unpleasant, that Jenna exuded anger and jealousy. What was Jenna like now, anyway? What's his Emily like? Heaven and earth. And even if John were to go to pieces, he would change absolutely nothing. I mean, not at all. Jenna, I'd love to, John, but if you're talking about presents, please don't even think about it. I understand. In fact, I think we need to find a way out of this situation. Well, there has to be. They always say there's only one way out of one situation. And you don't have one. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. What time would be best for you? If you can get an hour early so I can be there at 6 o'clock, I can do that. John clenched his eyes. What is he doing? Then asked Jenna decisively, "Jenna, can you at least tell me what kind of flowers you like?" She laughed. "I like roses, like all women do." John almost blurted out that, for example, his Emily adores only chrysanthemums. All then yes, tomorrow from that birthday. John's mind clicked. He didn't want to go home. He didn't want to live like that anymore. He wanted to live a good life, the way a professional of his caliber deserves. It took him a long time to come to this decision. Even though Jenna had urged him to move almost immediately, maybe he still would have hesitated. But then Emily started talking to him. How could she tell him to do all the posts? And when she caught him, he just didn't bother to move that unpleasant conversation again. What was the point of putting up with it? He told her everything that was on his mind. Everything was almost ruined by that drawing, the one he had once found on the balcony, and something stirred in his soul. It made him want to cry. I went to bed upset. In the morning, I decided I had to end things with Jenna. She'd sent him a list of hot tours in the morning. He hasn't been to the seaside in 1,000 years. It's so tempting. The vacation at work was no problem. John, of course you should go. Don't we get it? You haven't been on vacation in 5 years. Don't worry. We'll support your department. So you'll be back. You'll be fine. How's yours? His boss looked at him sympathetically. What could he tell him about leaving them? Well, of course he couldn't. He shrugged, nothing new. All right, go on. I won't keep you too long. Take a vacation from the hubris, realizing that after the vacation, you will be waiting for a completely different position. It's a good thing you're on vacation. With renewed vigor, he started. He recounted the conversation to Jenna, leaving out the phrase about his family. Jenna rubbed his hands together. But here's life getting better. First, we're gonna have to get you a decent car. Your car's been in the scrap heap for a long time. Then we can expand our place. John lay on the couch and believed that everything would be just like that. What else could it be? Now he's a free man. The vacation at the sea was unforgettable. John never even once had the urge to call to find out how Wendy or Emily were doing, and Jenna never left a minute to spare. Take him on a field trip, to his room, to the beach. He's tanned, and he's looking good. Jenna would lie beside him at night and say, you're so handsome, strong, you're the best. And he believed it was true. He went to work with pleasure. First of all, he had a good rest. Secondly, he realized that very soon he would become not the head of the department, but the head of the whole division. And this is quite different. Even cars will be allocated to him. And not just any car, but a good one. His company has all the cars. Fire greeted the guard, immediately went to the office to the boss to hand souvenirs from the sea. Good morning, David. The boss slowly turned from the window. Hello, John. How was your vacation? Very well. I brought you a souvenir. The warden looked at John strangely. He didn't even feel comfortable under that look. I brought my daughter a souvenir too. John stopped smiling. What did he want? Sooner or later everyone was going to find out, and he was mentally preparing for it. What did his daughter have to do with it? What did she have to do with it? Oh, John, I've been working with people for so many years, and I never thought you'd be capable of something like this. John chuckled. But you can't judge anything because you don't know anything. I'm sorry. I have to go to work. The supervisor gave him an attentive look and shook his head. Clearly, there was a woman involved. He had talked to Emily several times, and he liked her. A beautiful, quiet woman, strong in spirit. And John was just furious. Who gave them the right to meddle in his private life? Who? What did they even know about his life? He slumped into his chair. Only a glass partition separated him, as head of the department, from the rest of the employees. Several times he took a break from his papers and realized that his colleagues were looking at him and obviously talking about him. So everyone here knew about him. But the most unpleasant thing that day was not the slanted glances, not the conversation with the boss. When he came to the cafe on the first floor to have lunch, people parted to let him to the cash register. He grinned. Wow, respect. They knowed he's going to be the boss soon. He put everything he had chosen on the tray, paid, and headed for his favorite table by the window. There were only 2 women from the neighboring department sitting on one side of the table. Enjoy your meal. He set down his tray and sat down. The women silently took their trays and moved to another table. John poured himself a fury. The first thing he would do when he became the boss would be to fire these 2 chickens who stuck their noses where they didn't belong. And a week later, something happened that John certainly didn't expect. A general meeting was called throughout the office. John came that day in a suit with a white shirt. He was well aware that today was the day he would be assigned to his new position. Jenna looked him over meticulously at home and was pleased. You look great. I like it a lot. After lunch, all the people stretched out to the hall. John went too. He sat in the front row where the other department heads sat. For the last time now, he would always sit at the table on the stage. His supervisor, David, lowered himself down next to him. He listened silently to everything that was being broadcast from the stage. Then John heard something. He jumped up, but quickly sat down by his supervisor. Some broad was appointed. After a second, he headed for the exit in rapid strides. An hour later, when everyone was back, including David, John headed for his office. "Can you explain to me what that was about? You said I was going to be the boss." The chief looked at him and answered calmly, "We all consulted and decided that such a serious post could not be headed by a man without principles. The man is a traitor." "Jesus, what the hell are you talking about? 1,000 people get divorced. 1,000 people leave their families. Maybe. But in this situation, what do you know about the situation? Have you lived in that kind of hell? You haven't. It's not for you to judge." The warden took off his glasses, rubbed his nose. "How do you know from others? I have a son with cerebral palsy, and his mom wanted an easy life just like you. No problems. But it's okay, we're doing fine. And by your logic, I should have put him in a boarding school immediately. In that case, I should probably quit. He's already regretting what he said. What if David says yes, and then what does he do? You know, that's not a bad idea. Anyway, you won't get any more support from me." In the evening, Janet was long gone from work. John didn't know why he was so worried, did he? Well, he quit. That's fine. There's always a job for a professional like him. He'll find one tomorrow. Jenna showed up at 0:00 with a whiff of champagne. What are you doing up? Where have you been?" Jenna gave him a surprised look. "What's with the tone?" "Normal tone. I was wondering where my woman was. Actually, it's gonna be morning soon. But first of all, I'm not two, I'm a woman. Serfdom was abolished a long time ago. And secondly, what kind of snobbery is this? I'm not going to answer to you for every move I make. We're adults, we have friends, we have girlfriends." John realized it was time to slow down. "But you could have called." "I could have, but I forgot." John, gritting his teeth, she forgot. He called 100 times. First she hung up on him. Then she just turned the phone off. "I have news." Jenna raised her hands. "John, all tomorrow. I'm insanely tired." He silently followed her into the bedroom, but Jenna collapsed so there was no room for him on the bed. He had to go back to the living room and make himself comfortable on the short couch. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking. He was hired. True, the salary was not so decent. Jenna was terribly unhappy. Emily should have her parental rights revoked so she doesn't run around complaining. What makes you think it's her? Who else? Even if it wasn't her, it was her. I told you, they're just poisoning your life. By the way, you filed the divorce papers. And this guy, cute little wedding dress review. About 3 years later, Jenna was fired for a big shortfall. The whole debt was pinned on her. And John suddenly realized he was right back where he'd left off. Only there was a kid, and here was Jenna. Just like that, all the money was going into the abyss. Jenna was paying off the debt so she wouldn't go to jail, and John was working. Jenna couldn't because less than the principal. She wasn't okay with it. Principal positions are snapped up very quickly. One evening on the way home, John turned down a familiar street, stopped under the windows, stood looking at the glowing squares. It was so disgusting and sweet. Wanted to go up and say what a fool he was to be forgiven. I wanted to see his daughter's drawings. "John, are you there?" He jerked. Next to the car was the grandmother of their first-floor neighbor. "Hello. Yes, I am. Haven't seen you in a while. You're just standing there for nothing. They sold your apartment and went somewhere very far away. You have to take an airplane. It's a different country. How did they leave? Why? Jenna's not allowed. But they didn't tell me that. They went away to live, I think. Oh, to Italy." He didn't understand anything. It's not like Grandma was confused. She's always been known to be very clever. And if that's true, then it's a load of crap. The doctor said a flight. Any flight could be Wendy's last. There's too much chance the valve could fail. Emily couldn't have volunteered for this, unless she also decided to make her life easier. No, Emily was definitely not capable of that. He pulled out of the yard, thinking about calling Emily's mother. But then he decided he'd better not. Now he could live his life in peace. But life wasn't going well. Things got a little out of hand. Jenna got a job as a bookkeeper at some housing and utilities department, and she made pennies. The firm where John worked was bought out and recruited young workers. He was offered to stay on the dole or quit. Now he had to scrape by on odd jobs. So he made a few. The car was the only thing he had when he was on the upswing. He and Jenna managed to buy a car. Jenna sold hers as soon as she got into debt. Today he came back from another coven. There was a desire to drink beer and sleep. But Jenna had other plans for him. Why are you turning yourself in? What's the big deal? I'm tired. Do you watch the news? There's an exhibition of some artist in our town starting today. She came from abroad. They say she's very talented. But that's not what I'm talking about. Today the women were saying that the city is flooded with foreigners. Do you have any idea how much cab drivers make these days? John looked longingly at the 2 bottles of beer. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. It's kind of a holiday for you and me today. A holiday? What kind of holiday? But I left you 10 years ago. But I wouldn't call it a celebration. Personally, I've had nothing but bad luck since you left. He was starting to get annoyed by the setbacks. So it's okay that you're the one who broke up my family. Who needs you? Should I have lured you in with a finger? You didn't have to. You dropped everything and came running. Not even a sick child stopped him. What a man. John jumped up, fists clenched. Are you gonna hit me? Go ahead. He stood there without moving. But you can't even do that. You can't do anything. John walked silently to the door. Anymore, and he'd hit her. It was all her fault, just her. It's just that she got caught up in the time when he doubted. Another person would have backed it up. It was all her and only her. John stopped for a smoke not far from the mall. Nearby on the wall, he saw a large poster. Wow, Nick was a young talent. The exhibition was at the House of Culture. I wonder what she's doing here. Well, not a city, of course, not the latest, but not Moscow either. Why did she come here? Other cab drivers. He found out that there are indeed a lot of foreigners in the city. They came to buy paintings that hadn't been sold for a long time because of this exhibition. The foreigners paid well. They left tips. I mean, it makes sense to go there. It's kind of closed to everyone. I'm eating now. I'll go too, even though I made a lot of money today. A mustachioed cab driver got into a wrecked Zhiguli and drove off. John pulled out of the parking lot. It's almost an hour to 7 o'clock. So he'll make it 10 times that time there's no work in the city. Who was on his way home from work and who was going for a walk? Back home near the House of Culture stood a lot of cars, all expensive, beautiful cabs stretched along the edge of the parking lot. One car attracted his attention, a big white Jeep. John did not even immediately realize what brand it was. Got out of the car, walked the machine around in a circle. Yeah, not bad. I wonder how much it cost. He stood for a while longer, then got into his car. How come he fell asleep? John never realized. I guess the fatigue had taken its toll. Plus, the sun was warming up. Caught the phone ringing. John, why aren't you answering the phone? It's the 3rd time I've called. I didn't hear you. I'm not yelling. What are you doing? Where are you? Is there a voice behind you? John put the phone away, and you're going to hang up. No, you imagined it. I just didn't say anything for a long time. Okay, well, then I thought you weren't working. Yes, I am. I am. Anyway, when you go home, get some sour cream and herring. John, I was wondering where he got the money for that. The coven had already been shoveled out, but he bit his tongue in time. He was, like, working, not sleeping. You understand me? He didn't answer. He looked out of the car window into the street. A woman was walking from the House of Culture. He didn't pay attention to her at first, but then he froze. It was Emily. There was no doubt about it. She was so beautiful, so fashionable, that he fell out of reality a little. It was as if she hadn't even been 10 years old, although she looked even better now than when he'd left her. "John, can you hear me?" "Hello. What's the connection?" "What for?" "Just paying money." The phone fell on the seat, and John jumped out of the car. Emily, the woman, who was already walking too slowly, as if she was waiting for someone, stopped, looked at him, and her eyes opened in surprise. "John, yes, Emily, it's me. What's not to recognize? You look beautiful." Emily's eyes turned cold. "Yeah, well, I didn't recognize you right away." "Oh, thank you." I know. That's how confused he was. I thought she'd blossom at his compliment. "What's up, Emily?" "I'm good. Thank you." Like Wendy. Now he's done something really stupid. I mean, why ask? It's obvious that Wendy's gone. No doctor's ever given her that much, so why would he even bring up his daughter? On the other hand, she's his daughter. There's nothing wrong with Wendy either. He was surprised, and apparently he made it too obvious. But did a young and girlish voice speak from somewhere off to the side? "You won't believe it, Daddy. Despite your best efforts, she didn't die." John turned sharply. A young girl stood beside him. Yes, he recognized her immediately. It was his daughter, Wendy. Behind her stood a man a little older than John himself, and he was looking at him with an unkind look. "Why did you do that, Wendy?" "I meant you no harm." The girl laughed. "No, you didn't. You didn't mean to hurt us or me when you left me without money, knowing how much the medicine cost. You knew I was dead without it. Mom hid everything, and I heard what you told her before you left. But you don't look like your life is any better without us, do you?" He didn't want to. "Do you know what we've all been through? When we were looking for a heart, we found one. But it was only a few hours on an airplane in another country. My heart stopped. Do you have any idea what Mom went through while you were on vacation from us? If it wasn't for Daddy Kevin, we wouldn't be talking to you right now. He's the only reason I'm alive, is because of him and Grandpa. I was able to fly back to my hometown for my own exhibition." John stood there in silence. Then he asked, "So Nick's young artist, is that you? Is that what you missed?" "Yes, Daddy. I wish you had money now. And the life you want. I mean, I wanted it." "No, you wouldn't. You're just not capable of doing things like Daddy, Kevin. You know, he almost went to jail because he forced the pilots of a private plane to land near the hospital grounds. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived. Would you have?" "No, Daddy, you couldn't have done anything because you'd rather walk away from difficulties and problems than deal with them." The man put his hand on Wendy's shoulder. "That's enough. Calm down." The daughter and the man walked towards the big white car. Emily looked at it thoughtfully. "But I won't ask you how you live. I can see that. I guess this is goodbye, John." He was just about to say something when he heard Jenna screaming. "John, wait, don't go." Oh my God, she was just home. Maybe she wasn't calling from home. Jenna ran up, out of breath, shoved John's bag. "Oh, at least he'll drive me home. I'm so tired." Emily, who was already walking to the car, stopped abruptly. She turned slowly and stared at John's wife. Jenna, the woman, also turned to her for a while, looked perplexed, and then, apparently recognizing Emily, left her with an appraising look and froze. "So that's who encouraged my husband to live a good life." Emily smiled. "Jenna, how many golden ones have you wished for? I think you only needed John to bite me harder. I had no idea it was you. You look like you're on a roll." "Oh well, it won't last long. You know how people fall from heights. No mistake. You buried your daughter. What kind of a bitch are you, Jenna?" "No, my daughter is alive and well. And as you can see, quite successfully." Jenna took a quick glance at the poster and wrinkled her nose like a toothache. "You're still something, but you're wearing expensive clothes for your daughter's account. So what? So you've never had happiness, and you'll never have a simple family life." Bam! Happiness. Jenna looked at her triumphantly. Kevin got out of the car again. Emily, for a long time, You know our son is going to be very unhappy about the long absence, maybe even throwing toys." Emily looked at Kevin with loving eyes. "Yeah, you're right. Let's go turn to Jenna and John. Well, goodbye." Advice, yes, love. They walked to the car. John followed Emily. Kevin turned around. Not good. Looked at him and shook his head negatively. The car turned out and out of the parking lot. They stared after her. Suddenly, Jenna's face twisted with anger. "Emily, it's okay. You're crying at me, John. You should sue your daughter for child support. She's got so much money, and you're struggling. I know people. We'll get you disability, and she'll pay like a sweetheart." He turned to Jenna. "If you don't want to be disabled now, you better shut up." "What's that? What are you gonna do? Loser? You've got yourself in a pickle." John hit a woman for the first time in his life. Not hard, just slapped her on the mouth and walked to the car. Jenna lit up the whole street with power. Help, 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 finding no support because there was simply no one around. She threw herself after him. John, stop. Don't you want to have a good life? But think how much money we can get from her without her noticing." Jenna jumped into the car at the last moment, and John sped off. His wife said something, but he didn't listen. There were no thoughts in his head. A big white car parked in front of a beautiful house. "Well, here we are." "Tired, Wendy?" The girl looked gratefully at Kevin. "No, Daddy, Kevin, it's okay. Let's go already." I can imagine Sebastian torturing Grandpa. They went in, but the house was quiet. That's odd. Actually, they thought Grandpa was exhausted, and his 4-year-old grandson had turned the house upside down. Kevin looked into the room. Dad then turned to them and pointed his finger into the room and held it to his lips. Emily and Wendy looked into the room and laughed quietly. The grandfather and grandson were sleeping right on the fluffy rug by the fireplace. Grandpa had a toy bow in his hands. Sebastian had one too. Apparently, they had been running around so much that as they played, they fell asleep. "Daddy, Daddy." "Well, the doctor told you not to strain your body." Robert, without opening his eyes, said. "Who asks him to strain his body? I can't play war games now." Sebastian also woke up, helped behind their backs with his eyes, and rushed to Wendy. But Daddy and Mommy let themselves be kissed too. Soon the whole family was sitting around the big holiday table. Wendy was thoughtful. Emily stroked her arm. "Why are you so upset?" "No, Mom, I think I'm relieved. I wanted to get back at him so badly. Today I realized that he got revenge on himself. Life punished him." Emily held her daughter close to her. "Well, that's good. You should never take revenge. Life will sort everything out." Robert raised his glass. "I propose we drink to Wendy's success." It's a resounding success, and as an expert on the subject, I'd say there's more to come. "Thank you, Grandpa." Not 5 minutes later, Robert raised his glass again. "And now I'd like to toast your return. Relatives should live together, and of course, in their homeland." 5 more minutes and another glass. "In an hour, Wendy, we'll put your grandfather in the bedroom." Kevin was surprised to hear Papa speak. What was that all about? You've never let yourself do that before. Robert stopped. "Son, if you only knew how glad I am to have you back. You have no idea how lonely and alone I've been here." Kevin looked at him in surprise. "But you never said anything." "Should I have?" "No, I didn't want to interfere with your life." The old man went straight to sleep. Wendy said how much he had suffered and why hadn't we come back sooner. Kevin hugged her. "It's all right. We'll all live together now. You'll paint. Mommy's planting flowers like she wanted. Daddy will help her. He's a lover of such beauty too. I'll finally take over the firm that's located in this town." And Wendy flicked the gum. Sebastian will go to kindergarten. He'll fight and hurt the teachers there. And we'll be scolded and called to the superintendent's office all the time. And we'll set up a line, and we'll take turns. We'll see who gives up the fastest. Wendy laughed softly and said, "Come on. Mom must have lost us. They went into the living room and saw that Emily and Evelyn were not sitting on the couch. Emily looks at the album with some surprise. This is the album Sebastian used to draw in all the time. Mom, what happened to your face? Nick, look at it. The girl looked at the album. She stared at it for a long time, then laughed. Congratulations, there's one more artist in the family. They laughed and hugged. Sebastian, seeing such an outrage, everyone hugging, and he was not taken. He burst out loudly, and the whole family rushed to him to soothe his tears. Emily looked at her own and realized that for the sake of such a day, she would agree to go through everything she had already gone through again. It's all about the outcome, and in the end, they are all happy.